No. You have to understand the title is the first and sometimes only thing people are going to see. When they're scrolling through your episodes, they're going to go by the title. Podcast growth people, welcome back to another episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasting all the time. I hope you enjoyed the latest episode number 8. Can you actually make money with a podcast? I predict that will probably be one of the more popular episodes because that is why many people start podcasts. Today, for episode number 9, a simple topic that I believe will add a lot of value to you no matter where you are in the podcast journey. One simple reason you're not getting more downloads. So I'm sure you've heard the old saying, don't judge a book by its cover. Unfortunately, when you're out looking at books, there isn't much else to judge, especially if you only get the opportunity to look. You don't have the opportunity to read through the book. So I want you to imagine two things, okay? Two different books. One, How to Become Rich Overnight. That's one book. The second book is How to Become Rich Eventually with Hard Work and Intention. What book are you going to click on? Or what book are you going to purchase? I guess you're not going to click on either of them. Which one would you buy? Which one would you leave that store with on that day? Probably the first one. Probably How to Get Rich Today or How to Become Wealthy Today. What we're going to talk about today is the importance of titles. And from my experience working with clients and naming at this point over almost 1,100 podcast episodes, I have realized that there are a couple different types of people when it comes to naming episodes. There are the people who just put the guest name, so they would just put Kevin Palmieri, and that's the name of the episode. That they use really, really long titles that don't really fit in to the podcasting apps. You can't even read the whole thing, or they're just putting up a simple statement that doesn't draw people into the episode. So we created something a little while ago that would help not only us understand the importance of titles, but it would help our clients as well. And if you're a podcaster and you have 100 episodes, you can look at your stats, right? And you can say, okay, well, this episode did really well, but it's also my third episode. How do I know how well it's doing compared to my latest episodes? So what I did is I created an algorithm that breaks down the number of days the episode's been out and how many downloads it has and all that happy jazz, and it'll spit out a listen score. And from my perspective, that's probably the best way to figure out the overall value of an episode. Now, when I started doing this for us, something weird happened. We started to correlate that certain words, certain phrases, certain questions did better than other episodes. So 5 ways to build confidence. That's an episode that we've done before that did really well. The number one thing holding you back. We've done those a couple times because as we learn, we can add more value based on that. Relationships. Anytime we use relationships in the word, in the title, it usually does really well. Vulnerability. That title usually does really well also. We have a deeper understanding now that certain words, certain topics, certain statements, certain phrases draw more eyes in to our episodes. And this is what we started to do. And this is your homework. This is a wonderful practice, a wonderful exercise that I have all of my clients do. After this episode, I want you to sit down and I want you to write out, ideally, it would be something that would make you stretch. So say 50. I want you to write out 50 of your listeners' most common problems. 50 things that they struggle with that they will get help with by listening to your podcast. That's part number 1. Part number 2, I want you to write out as many buzzwords as humanly possible. So again, we are in the self-improvement space, so we have an understanding now of what people are going through. A lot of the listeners in the community have struggled with low confidence. They've struggled with toxic relationships. They've struggled with low self-worth, lack of consistency. We understand them at a deep level, but we understand the problems that they're having. And ultimately, the point of your podcast is to help them solve those problems. So buzzwords for us might be vulnerability. It might be relationships. It might be consistent. It might be courage. It might be mentors, those types of words. So if you can write out 50 of the problems that you're solving, if you can write out as many buzzwords as you understand based on your audience, when you're doing your titles for your episodes, if you're doing solo episodes, and remember, we talked about this back in, let's see, episode number 5. Episode number 5 was, should you be doing solo episodes and guest interviews? The beautiful side of a solo episode is you can name the episode before you do it, and you can speak exactly to that topic. So imagine this, and I'll give you our process. Monday comes, and on Monday, we record all 7 of our episodes. That's our goal. Usually we get 3 to 5 done, and we have to put them somewhere else during the week. But I will ask myself a couple questions. I'll say, 1, what is a story that I've experienced, that somebody I know has experienced, or a client has experienced that I can share on the podcast? It has to be in alignment with what our ideal listener is going through. So that's a question I ask myself. But then I ask myself this: what is one of the major problems that our community has that we can solve on an episode today? So just think of it as, let me think of an episode that we're doing. We did this the other day, so I will pull this up while I'm talking to you. And I'll tell you another thing too. This podcast is going to be very lightly edited. So my goal is to edit this podcast as little as humanly possible. So will I make mistakes? Absolutely. Will I do things in live time where I pull something up on my laptop so I can give you accurate data? Absolutely. That's the style I've always liked. That's the style that we've used with our other podcast. And I want it to be a conversation more than me just saying stuff. And I will make mistakes. I think that's par for the course. Okay. We dropped an episode Wednesday, August 24th, episode number 1073, called You Are Not for Everyone, and That's Okay. That episode was based on the understanding that many people are afraid to be themselves because they think if they're themselves, they're going to turn certain people off. No matter what, you're going to turn people off, so you might as well be yourself in the process. Now, we could have gone many different ways with that title, but when I was thinking of what should we name this, that is what I thought would land the most. I think one of the fears that our community has is judgment. I think another fear or struggle that they have is trying to fit in where they don't belong. I'm trying to touch on that with that title. Another great title, in my opinion, that we had recently was episode number 1070, dropped August 21st. One word nobody likes, but everyone needs. So this is the thought. What you're trying to do is you're trying to inform your listeners about what the episode is going to involve without giving it away so they don't click. It's this fine line. And I always like to think of it from this perspective. Your goal is to get your audience to self-identify as, I am the type of person who would listen to that. So you're going to get one of 2 responses. You're going to get so what or heck yes. So what? I don't want to listen to that. I'm not interested in that type of content. Or hell yes, that is right up my alley. For me, if it was something along the lines of how vacuum robotics are going to change the world, that is a so what for me. That doesn't really apply to me that much, right? But a title of how to grow your podcast quicker might be a hell yes for me.
Hi, my name's John Laurito, and I just wanted to give a big shout out to Kevin Palmieri. I had reached out to him. He had been referred to me when I had shared with a friend of mine some interest in doing a podcast, and he said, you've got to use Kevin. He's fantastic. He's the best around. He'll get you started and off the ground and soaring high in no time. And take it from somebody who knows nothing about podcasting other than maybe saying a few things. But as far as behind the scenes, the startup, everything, I knew nothing. Kevin was phenomenal in terms of leading me through the whole process, and not just easy to work with, but really, really knows his stuff. A great combination between leading me through all the stuff I had no idea what I was doing, but also really listening to me and understanding what it was I was trying to accomplish and what my vision is. So whether you're looking for somebody to help you and get you started, or somebody, as I've done, where I'm putting it entirely in his hands because I've got total trust and confidence in him, and he is a true pro and easy to work with, any of those ends of the spectrum, you're going to have a lot of success and a lot of fun working with Kevin. Trust me. Thanks.
So you really have to try to look at your titles from the perspective of your audience. And this is what I'll say too. A lot of people are lazy with their titles. They do the episode, they do the interview, they edit it, they do whatever they're going to do, and they say, okay, well, I just need a title. What's a simple title for this? No. You have to understand the title is the first and sometimes only thing people are going to see. When they're scrolling through your episodes, they're going to go by the title. And this is what I'll tell you. So think of it this way. Yesterday, I think we had 1,800 or let's just say 1,500 downloads yesterday on our other podcast, Next Level University. You would think that most of those downloads are from a new episode. It doesn't really work that way. Out of those 1,500 downloads, maybe 100 of those were for the newest episode, and everything else was from old episodes. And when I say old episodes, I mean people go back to episode number 100. They go back 1,000 episodes. So you have to understand the importance of the title in the long run is very, very, very important, because when you have a catalog of episodes and you're going through, people are going to pick based on the title and the title alone. And if the title does not tell them what they're going to learn, if it doesn't tell them what they're going to get, if it doesn't tell them what problem they're going to solve, if it doesn't pique interest, they're most likely not going to click. And this is why you'll see some of your episodes do really well. Some of your guest episodes do really well. Other ones don't do as well. And I would bet, especially with the solo episodes, the title is the biggest reason. Now, obviously, when you have a guest on, they might share it and you might get some new exposure. So it's not always apples to apples. But with solo episodes, it really is pretty heavily dependent on your title. So this is going to be a quick episode because I want to just get straight to the point. Write out 30, 40, 50 of the biggest things that your listeners are going through, the biggest problems that they have, the biggest fears, the biggest struggles, and these are things that you're going to solve. And think of some buzzwords. What words work really well in your genre, in your niche, in your industry? And then use that information. Now you have more information. Use that information to create your podcast titles and understand the importance of the titles. Think of it this way. This is a really good way to think of it. You could record an episode on your cell phone in the middle of a windy field with a bunch of music in the background, and nobody would be able to hear it. And it would be an overall not very valuable episode. But if you named it correctly, you might get a lot of people to listen, because the name is that important. Now, I don't want you to do that. I want you to make the episode as valuable, more valuable than the title. But that just speaks to the power of the title. And this is where a lot of people get messed up, because they do the hard work of prepping, they do the interview, they do the solo episode, and they just say, okay, let me just throw this out. Number 44, money. Boom. Let me throw that out there. If you're doing solo episodes, you should reverse engineer the episode based on the title. So I would suggest coming up with a title first if you're doing a solo episode. Then you know exactly what you're talking about, and you can speak to those points. So the importance here, I've already spoken about it, obviously, in many, many different ways. But I want you to understand that sometimes you only get one shot to get a new listener. They might go through your titles and say, this isn't for me. Your ultimate goal, this is the through line, this is the one piece if you take nothing else away from this. You want to help your listeners self-identify as the type of person who would listen to this. So there's so what or hell yes. If you can get your listeners to say hell yes with your titles, your podcast will get way more listens, way more views, depending on if you're doing YouTube. Now, if you want to figure out how valuable your titles are and you want to get the algorithm, quote unquote, that I'm using, just reach out. I was going to try to make a Google Sheet and just share it, but I know people will be able to edit it. And if you don't understand Google Sheets, it's not going to make much sense. So there is a lot that goes into it. You got to download all your numbers and all that happy jazz, but I'm happy to walk you through it and show you what's worked for us and how we've done it. It gives you a really good idea of what's working and what's not. and I have not found anything better yet. So please reach out if you're interested in that. Again, I'm happy to send it to you. I'm happy to hop on the Zoom for a free 30-minute call and discuss it with you. But I'll add this as well. You have to look at your numbers. So yeah, maybe you're listening to this episode and you're saying, well, Kev, I understand the importance of titling, and I think I'm doing a pretty darn good job. Cool. Track your numbers every day. Every single day, I want you to log into your host, whether it's Buzzsprout, whether it's Libsyn, whether it's Blueberry, whatever it is, and I want you to write down the number of downloads you have that day, and then what's the difference between today and yesterday. We have to make data-driven decisions. That's one thing that we do as a podcast that I believe separates us, and it actually helps us to a drastic degree, is most of the decisions we're making is based on data. Most of the decisions we're making is based on things that we can look at and say, okay, there's a number associated with this result. How do we get that result again? So make sure you're tracking your numbers every single day. That way you can see what's working. You can see what guest episodes did really well. Make it a habit. Now, don't obsess over it. Do not obsess over it. But if you do not measure it, it's very hard to manage it. So that is a piece I will give to everybody. Even if you understand titling at a deep level, maybe you're not tracking your listens. Tracking your listens will help you tremendously. I keep saying in every one of these episodes that I'm going to do blank for next episode, and I always end up just switching it. So this is what I'm going to do. Next episode, so next week for episode number 10, I will do an episode on the... Let me see. Let me just make sure I haven't done it yet. Yeah. Next episode I'm going to do is going to be the top 5 mistakes I see from podcasters. Top 5 mistakes. I'm going to write that down. Yeah, the most common 5 mistakes I see from podcasters. Again, I've done a lot of episodes and I've been on a lot of shows, and you get a pretty good idea on whether or not somebody is going to win based on a couple different factors. So I will go over those next week. This is a shorter episode. That's good. That's what I wanted. I want to try to get in and out of here 10, 15, 20 minutes max. That way you don't have to sit through a whole bunch of content. We can just get right to it. As always, my podcast people, if you want to learn more about podcasting, please just reach out to me. I am happy to do a free call. There is no strings attached. I'm not going to sell you on anything. You're not going to go on an email list. It's literally you and I on a Zoom call. I walk you through the questions that I would want to ask and the stats that you have, and I say, okay, this is what I would do next. This is what your business should look like, and ultimately, you'll leave with a higher awareness. If you are a podcaster who is sick of doing the video editing, you don't know how to do the audio editing, you don't really know how to create micro content for social media, you're looking for some coaching, I am also happy to discuss that, but it always starts with a free call. I don't want you just to reach out and send me money. I would rather you and I get to know each other to make sure that it's a win-win, and my ultimate goal, no matter what, is to add value. So that is always the goal. My link will be in the show notes. We have the best team in the world, and we would love to help you get to the next level of your podcasting journey. My podcast people, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you again for tuning in, and keep on podcasting. Next week, the top 5 mistakes I see most often from podcasters. Talk to you soon.